Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, here in New York City. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, if you're following this general session out there on the World Wide Web. Cloud Expo, day 2, we're in New York City. We have one of those famous marriages for which Cloud Expo is becoming increasingly famous. This time it's Dell and VMware. Coming up the church aisle, John von Voros, actually first, followed by Teresa Vu, not quite a marriage in that sense. They are going to tell us, as you can see, about building on your existing framework, which we like, and it's, again, that enterprise cloud emphasis for which Cloud Expo is famous. Take it away, please. Wait, take it away, please, John. Life is so simple.
Well, thanks for the applause. Hope you all are doing well this afternoon. This is the session where people are usually settling into their afternoon nap, so we'll try and keep things moving. I'm John von Voros. I'm a product development manager at Dell for Cloud Services. And Teresa and I are going to talk to you about some hybrid architectures that Dell and VMware are recommending. Pretty much every presentation that you've seen today probably started off with a definition of what cloud is. Most of you know cloud has reached the pinnacle of the hype cycle, and pretty much anything is called cloud now that anybody can attach a name to. So we're going to start off with this. My engineers actually define cloud as anything marketing doesn't know how to explain, but we actually have a more pragmatic definition here. And most of these are things that you're already used to. Cloud is, for most people, cloud means that I can expand and contract very quickly. And it's important because you don't want to have to buy huge infrastructure ahead of the curve and then find out you didn't need it, because you're going to have a lot of explaining to do. On demand, and I think for most IT professionals, what makes cloud more interesting than anything else is self-service. Used to be you'd get 3 to 6 months to deploy a database, and that was okay. Actually, that was considered pretty fast in the old times. Nowadays, the expectation is that you're up and ready in several days, or in some cases, several hours. So you don't have the luxury to spend 3 to 6 months planning for your architecture. Highly automated, we want to be able to deploy quickly. Another kind of new thing is IT costs weren't very predictable in the past. And that was because from the time you purchased the hardware to the time you actually implemented your application, it took a long time, and you weren't quite sure where the costs were buried in terms of the infrastructure and your developers and where that happened. Now it's more of a phone bill kind of paradigm where you're actually just seeing what your consumption is and you're billed accordingly. Hopefully you're not surprised like your kid's sending out too many text messages, so hopefully you've got a bill that you can understand, and it's something that is in the budget that you've placed on it. The idea of unlimited processing and unlimited storage. It used to be you had to be very careful about how you set up your architectures, and you had to do a very good job of predicting what capacity you were going to need. Well, cloud kind of helps with some of those things. And of course, for Dell, one thing that we talk about over and over again is we believe that all cloud architectures should be open and non-proprietary. The best thing an IT person can have is choice. When you no longer have choice with your vendors, that's when people get a little lazy. They don't try quite so hard. So some of the things that cloud will enable you to do, obviously, be more competitive. And competitiveness can mean a couple things. One thing for sure it means is that I need to be much more operationally efficient than my competitors. But it also means that I'm more agile as well. And certainly cloud helps you to provide more resources quicker and to be more of a business value to your company. You want to automate your quality of service and set expectations consistently every time. And you want to pay-as-you-go model so that you can expand and contract your business. For example, retail, most of their business is done in the November and December timeframe. And in the past, they would have to buy all their architecture to meet that peak demand. And then 10 months out of the year, it didn't get used. And that's terribly inefficient. And certainly, choice is important. One of the things virtualization did for us was it abstracted the software from the hardware. So you had some choices there. Well, cloud is the next logical step beyond that, and it's abstracting all of that from your service provider. So you want to be able to move application stacks around and choose service providers that give you the best value and the best service. Certainly, a lot of CIOs are here, and they're talking about, they tend to deal with the bigger picture. Certainly scalability on demand. If you look at a company that provides gaming like Zynga, for example, their games tend to start off kind of small and they go viral and expand very quickly. Well, it's very hard for a company to anticipate that kind of thing. So from a burst capability, it's great to be able to scale up very, very quickly. And certainly most of the startups that you see in the Web 2.0 kind of environment have to take advantage of those kind of services. Reduced hardware costs. Now, most of you, I'm sure you've already done virtualization. That's the first step towards the cloud. We've all saved a ton of money by consolidating our hardware. And that's just the first step, and it's certainly the one that most people are familiar with. But there's a lot more to it than that, and it's a reduction of complexity. It's the speed with which I can deploy. I can reduce the number of staff that deploy applications. Common to old legacy environments, it's about 1 to 40 or 1 to 50, one admin for 50 servers. Cloud environments, you're seeing 1 admin for 5,000 servers. So you're seeing about a 10 to 1 reduction once you get to a fully cloud-enabled environment. And then, of course, in some cases, there are skill sets that your company just doesn't have, and you don't want to staff up in that respect, so you can get to cloud or service providers to help you with that. Now, you've made the decision to go to the cloud. What other decisions are you going to make? Certainly, most of our customers that have a lot of legacy applications start off with a private cloud. In some cases, they will look at their existing infrastructure. When the hardware refresh comes up, instead of refreshing the hardware and porting their physical apps over, they set up a small cloud environment. They virtualize their apps, and then they move them over, and they create their private cloud. Private cloud can be either on-site, or some of our customers who are faced with building data centers, they decide that they're going to put their cloud in a hosted environment. So you take your private cloud, you put it in a hosted environment, and then have a service provider run that cloud for you. The other side of that is going to be the public cloud. Public cloud is good for certain kinds of workloads, and we'll go into that a little later. There's obviously some concern about security and uptime and those kinds of things. What we would say is that there's not any one solution for any one customer, and the right solution may be a combination of both. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. Certainly with a private cloud, I have more control over my security. I have more control over the audit process. I have more control over how resources are implemented. But it's very, very hard for me to scale quickly. And in order for you to set up a private cloud, you have to have a fairly decent-sized infrastructure before it makes sense from a cost perspective. On the public side, it's kind of nice. I can get hundreds or thousands of servers set up, and I only pay for the hours of usage that I have, and I don't have to put millions of dollars of capital up front. Cost scale with the usage, so the more customers I get, the more resources I use, the more money I'm going to pay, but that's okay because I'm getting revenue in. And then there's a lot of choices that emerge that you just can't do internally on your own cloud due to limited resources. So no one size fits all. It's different for different kinds of customers. And you're going to have to figure out which mix of services, whether it's all private, all public, or hybrid, which I think most customers fall into, makes sense for your company. So the next question is, I've got a bunch of legacy apps, and I've got some new apps that we're developing. What makes sense to go into a public cloud or a private cloud? There's other requirements. If you're a medical company, for example, you're worried about HIPAA compliance. Well, there are very few clouds that are HIPAA compliant. There may be requirements for you to keep data in-house. You may not be able to put your application out in the cloud. In that case, private cloud makes sense. Workloads. Some workloads just don't do well with clouds and virtualization in general. They tend to be ones that are high I/O count, ones where you have to have the database right next to the application. Those are a little harder to get to work properly in a virtualized environment. What makes a good app? Well, the new 2.0 paradigm, the way that people develop software is changing very quickly. Legacy way was to set up a huge database. You'd set up Oracle or SAP in your data center. You'd spend 1 to 2 years getting it to run properly. And everything's very tightly integrated with that hardware. Well, that doesn't work well for cloud environments. The new way to develop If you look at the Googles of the world, you look at Zynga, which does the games, Netflix, for example, they architect their software so that it doesn't depend on hardware uptime to be available. It's stateless. Old legacy apps, if you look at, we developed for tandems many years ago on the premise that the hardware would never go down. Well, the new way to develop software is to build the resiliency actually into the software so you're not dependent on the hardware 100% of the time. Those are the kind of apps that do very, very well in a production environment in the cloud. So, where do you start? Most of you have already started the virtualization journey, and that's the first step that you need to take. You can't get to cloud environments without doing virtualization first. Obviously, you've reduced the number of servers, you've reduced the number of admins, you've reduced your cost. The next thing you do is you move to a private cloud. Private cloud is going to enable you to automate a lot of your services. It's going to enable you to charge back to your different divisions properly. It's going to make you much more flexible. And then finally, you figure out which workloads make sense in a public cloud. And in some of our customers, for example, they've run out of capacity in their production clouds. They look at their development cloud. Well, their development cloud is a mirror image of what their production cloud is. They take their non-mission critical dev loads, put it in the cloud, and move all of that architecture over to the production environment. So they're no longer having to buy all new hardware to expand on their production environment. So there's a lot of different ways that cloud can be used. This is kind of the representative of how you can get to the cloud from the whole journey. Some customers we have actually completely bypassed, the newer customers, but they completely bypass buying any infrastructure and go straight into the cloud. And that's great for startups. They can get up and running. They don't have a lot of capital in the beginning. And we have other customers that have an evolutionary path that I just walked you through. It just depends on where you are and where your company is. If you have legacy apps, it's going to take a lot longer for you to get to a cloud environment. If you're starting from scratch with a new company, it's relatively easy to do so. For those customers that want to build a private cloud, we have some help. There's business-ready configurations. We have about a dozen different architectures that Dell has. They have either blade or rack storage, iSCSI, or fiber channel. They have complete implementation guides that walk you through setting up the servers, the storage, and the network, and how to cable it, and how to implement virtualization. Another program we have at Dell is called vStart. vStart is, as you can see, this is actually one of them in this picture. This is a rack that shows up on a pallet on your loading dock, and it's pre-wired, it's pre-installed, and if it's a greenfield environment, you basically hook up power, pipe, and ping, and you're ready to go, and this environment can be up and running in a week. So we have a lot of different ways to get engaged with you on private clouds if that's something that you desire to do. And this is every presentation has an eye chart, and this one's mine. This is how we start with the Dell infrastructure. You add in VMware. We, at Dell, were one of the first companies to actually install an embedded hypervisor. You can power up our servers, and they automatically come up in VMware, even if there are no hard drives. So for some companies, that makes deployment of VMware very, very easy. Next step is you need to control all these servers, and that's what vCenter does. We have plugins for our hardware. Most customers that use VMware prefer to stay in vCenter and don't like to move into different tools. We have plugins so that you can look at all of our hardware and our statistics and what's going on in your environment. And you can look at it all in vCenter, so it's very easy to have a single pane of glass. We also have storage between our iSCSI and fiber channel lines. These two have plugins into vCenter. You can look at capacity. You can see if you have power supply issues. You can see if there's networking problems, those kinds of things. So it's all in the vCenter console. Next step above that, once you've virtualized your environment, you have virtualization down pretty well, that's when you start looking at VCloud. And Teresa's going to talk a little more about VCloud. VCloud enables me to set up different organizations, and it allows me to be much more flexible in the way that I run virtualization within my company. Dell also has additional software. We have the Advanced Infrastructure Manager. That will help you. It's a single point of control for physical and virtual workloads. I can move a workload between a physical server and a virtual server, and it's very, very seamless. The self-service creator, which is one of the things that cloud is best known for, is creating that catalog for my IT folks. They set up their catalog. They have these pre-done templates. They have role-based enablement, so I'm only allowed to set up those applications that my job needs. We also have a concept of leasing, where you can set up a VM and put an expiration date so that you don't have VM sprawl out of control. And then VIS Director, that's basically the ability to monitor between your physical and virtual workloads, do trend analysis. It enables me to do ROI reporting. It enables me to know when I'm running out of capacity. And then lastly, which this is something that's relatively new, but I find it very exciting. VMware has come out with a plugin to vCenter called the VCloud Connector. And Teresa's got some more on that. But VCloud Connector basically is the glue that connects your virtual environment that you set up on Dell hardware into a cloud environment. And then, of course, we have services that tie all this together, so you don't have to do this on your own. So from a strategy perspective, these are things you've heard from us probably over and over again. We want open architectures. We believe x86, and I think most people here believe x86 is the architecture for cloud. You want to have interoperability between your private and public clouds. And that's important because for those companies that have huge burst requirements in different times of the year, this capability really provides them a lot of flexibility. And we believe that eventually cloud services will be just as important as your internal infrastructure. We are members of most of the standards boards. We very much believe in standards. We're not out to push proprietary technology. We have architectural frameworks to make sure that clouds are interoperable, and I described some of those to you on the previous slide. Dell, some of you wonder why we're here. We're not always known as the biggest cloud company, but it turns out that Dell provides somewhere between, I think it's 6 or 7 out of the top 12 mega cloud companies use Dell hardware. We have custom servers that we build on very large scale for those customers. We're learning quite a bit from them. They're helping us. And we're helping a lot of our customers that have proprietary and old Unix systems move into this new paradigm. It takes time. It's not going to be done overnight. Previous presentation, one of our guys was talking about 10 years. If you're an old company, to get to cloud nirvana and get to everywhere you want to be, it's not just you that has to make that transition. It's all of your legacy software providers as well. So this will take some time. It's not something that happens overnight. And then, of course, we have quite a few services to help you get there. Dell Services are kind of interesting. It's different from an older company I work for. Dell Services tends to like compartmentalized engagements. We don't want to send consultants to go nest in your data center and charge you by the hour and not have any end date or end goal in mind. So we give you a fixed price engagement. We'll give you a fixed duration. Going into the engagement with Dell, you know exactly what to expect. You know what the outcome is. And you're going to be pleasantly surprised how predictable everything is. And we start off with a workshop that kind of evaluates where you are. We take you to a proof of concept. We can accelerate certain things depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And then at the end of the engagement, you're going to have a design that's custom to you and very, very affordable. So now I'm going to turn it over to Teresa, and she's going to tell you how VMware makes hybrid cloud possible.
Am I on? Great. Okay. Hello, everyone. Since John stood on that side, I think I'll stand on this side, just to be clear that it's not a real marriage. I don't want John's wife to see this presentation and get the wrong idea. So just to introduce myself quickly, I'm Teresa Vu. I'm part of the product marketing team for cloud services at VMware. And so, what I really want to do is reiterate John's message about our belief of this open cloud computing concept. Oh, sorry, wrong way. They told me this was idiot-proof, but apparently not. So I wanted to put this slide up to just, talk to the hype that John mentioned. So, we've all seen these cartoons, this idea of jumping on the bandwagon, running to the cloud, and what people are really talking about is jumping over to the public cloud. So forget about your legacy infrastructure, forget about your legacy application, jump on the bandwagon, take the plunge into the public cloud. And what Dell and VMware are talking about here is this hybrid model. So what we were looking at is a cross-cloud federation and coordination with the hybrid cloud model. And that's really where we believe that you're going to get streamlined costs and improved agility, looking at a hybrid cloud model where you're using both private and public cloud resources for your cloud computing. And what we really believe in is a ubiquitous model of interoperability, what we call the open cloud computing concept. And we really believe in this concept, and that's why VMware has partnered with service providers such as Dell through the VCloud Powered Services program to offer public cloud services. So through the VCloud Powered Services program, what we're offering are private and public cloud services based on a common platform that I think most of you are familiar with based on VMware virtualization, common service-based cloud management, and then also common security. Security still comes up as one of the key concerns for people moving into the public cloud. And based on a lot of the technology that we've brought to market with service providers such as Dell, we're expanding the trust boundaries of your enterprise and really maximizing application portability and mobility from the private to public cloud, and the other way around. Okay. Oops, sorry. And just to reiterate John's point on virtualization, I just wanted to put this number up there. I'm not sure if most of you know about this, but with virtualization, according to Gartner, back in 2009, when you look at new workloads, more workloads were deployed on virtual machines than physical servers, and that was already 2 years ago. And you can see the quote from Gartner as well, is that they really believe, and they're echoing the sentiments of several of the key analysts in the industry, that virtualization really is the key to unlocking cloud computing. So with the VMware vCloud solution, what we provide is an architecture, a comprehensive architecture for a private cloud solution. So starting with our vSphere product, which I think a lot of you are familiar with, for the virtualization layer. And then again, as I mentioned, security always comes up as one of the key concerns, particularly with the public cloud solution. So we have, we've implemented a suite of security solutions through our vShield security family. And then operations and management with vCenter. And then finally, how do you actually consume and manage the cloud, which is through our vCloud Director. And I'll talk about that in a bit more detail. But what we really emphasize here is that we have this comprehensive solution for a private cloud environment, but that is exactly compatible with your public cloud environment. So through a service provider such as Dell, it's built on the same architecture so that you're getting the maximum portability for your applications that you already have in your data center today. So you're not re-architecting, rebuilding to move to a public cloud provider. And vice versa, because there will be applications that you may start in the public cloud, or you'll port over to the public cloud, but you may want to bring those back as well. So we want to give you that flexibility of being really having that mobility between the two cloud solutions. We also offer the vCloud API, and that lets third-party solutions, tools also are compatible with the solution as well, and then cross-cloud management with the vCloud Connector tool. And I want to go into a little bit more about the vCloud Connector tool, and we also have a demo of this at our booth as well, because this is really the first realization of the hybrid cloud concept. So vCloud Connector, so for those of you who are familiar with VMware and vSphere, you'll recognize this as the vSphere console. So vCloud Connector is a tool that we offer. It's available for free, downloadable from our site. That's an add-in to your vSphere console. And so you can see it's down there in the bottom as a plugin. With vCloud Connector, what it allows you to do is access both your on-premise and off-premise clouds. So you can see in the left there, I'm showing on the top a private data center implementation, so an on-premise implementation, and a public cloud implementation there as well in a single pane of glass. So all you have to do is put in your credentials for that public cloud provider, and it'll have an HTTPS connection to your public cloud, so where you can see both your on-premise and off-premise workloads, and you'll be able to access it from this single console. So you can see on the right-hand side the virtual machines that are on your on-premise deployment, and so you can have access to those to migrate templates or workloads over to your public cloud implementation. So really, again, from that single pane of glass, being able to access both on-premise and off-premise, you can power on, power off, access the remote consoles for those workloads that are in the public cloud, and then again, be able to migrate workloads and templates across clouds. So really giving you the flexibility to move between clouds, access both clouds, and see everything from one console. I also wanted to go into a little bit of more detail on VCloud Director, because when we talk about cloud, the question that really comes up is, what does a cloud look like? Tell me what I'm going to see, what I'm going to use, what am I going to touch and feel when you say that I'm using a cloud? So VCloud Director is VMware's tool for cloud management. So from an administrator perspective, VCloud Director is a higher level of abstraction above vSphere. So what it does is, it abstracts, organizes, and allocates all those resources that you have in vSphere today. From an end user perspective, it's a portal to allow you to access your workloads in both a private cloud and public cloud deployment. And so this is what VCloud Director looks like from a user perspective. So here I've been given access as a user. I'm part of the finance business unit, and you can see that I've got 3 applications running in my cloud environment. You can see all the virtual machines that are running behind those applications. And then you can see on the left-hand side, add cloud computer system. So you can add, in a self-service manner, be able to add more resources into your cloud environment, depending on the resources that the administrator has provided for you, but in a self-service manner. So you're not putting in a ticket or talking to an IT person to be able to get another virtual machine. So it really streamlines the process and gives, keeps control within IT. So you've predefined what resources that you're going to be able to give this user, but then they can deploy in a self-service manner. And people ask us a lot, what use cases are you seeing for both private cloud, public cloud, so essentially hybrid cloud deployments? So John talked a little about, he mentioned Zynga in the public cloud space. So we see a lot of these, web-based companies, especially when they're starting out, they have no idea what their capacity is going to be like. And so public cloud really gives them the flexibility of that elasticity. So if they do get more users, they power on more machines, and if they don't, they're not paying for it. And then we also see, we've worked previously with a hotel rewards group. And so they know that from a travel perspective, users really have demand based on summer months and holiday times where they're really booking a lot more travel. So they'll move to the public cloud to really allow them that burst capability for more resources during those seasonal peaks of demand. On the private cloud side, we see a lot of companies who are, have a heavy M&A, so purchasing a lot of companies. And with the private cloud, what they're really trying to do is standardize the infrastructure for all of these companies that they're bringing in. And I talked to one company, so they had a private cloud deployment, and they had one business unit that was on a different set of hardware, and a critical application went down for that business unit. And the IT department told them that, basically, if you had moved on to the private cloud deployment, we would have had you up and running in a matter of hours instead of 1 or 2 weeks, because they're on this, very separate and different set of infrastructure. So that, really incentivized them to move into the company's private cloud deployment. And another area where we see is global access. So really getting access to where the users are. And we see this a lot with online travel sites. So the key for them is the time it takes to refresh a search result. So if you're going onto a Kayak or an Expedia, the longer it takes for them to refresh that search result means the more users that they're going to lose. So 1 second of refresh time means millions of dollars to these guys. So what they're trying to do is move into a public cloud environment where where that data and where those workloads are closer to their end users so that they're getting much, much faster refresh times and not having people move away from those pages. And in the end, regardless of its private cloud or public cloud, what we're really looking at is your cloud. And as John mentioned, there's no journey, there's no cloud that's going to be one size fits all. It's really going to depend on your legacy applications, what does it make sense, how virtualized you are, what applications are going to make sense to move into a public cloud environment. You also want to leverage your existing investments, so hardware, software, as well as people knowledge. So that's one of the key advantages with being based on VMware virtualized, moving over to a public cloud provider such as Dell, who is also based on VMware, is the knowledge base that you're carrying with you. So you don't want all of your workers going out and learning all of these new technologies, which is really going to slow down your deployment. And you really want it to be flexible but secure. And again, security consistently comes up as one of the key concerns in the public cloud space. So you want to know that you're going with an enterprise class secure cloud provider that's using the same security techniques that you're using in-house and really protect you. And then something that really is uniquely designed for your business. So also through the services that Dell offers can really meet your needs in that sense. And it's a journey, so we're talking about an incremental change. You need to look at where you are today, where you are on that virtualization journey, where you're at on that public cloud journey, and make an incremental change, not a wholesale change like I showed in that first slide of you're not dumping all your infrastructure, you're not dumping all of your legacy applications and that knowledge with it and jumping onto a unknown public cloud solution. So. On behalf of Dell and VMware, we want to thank you for attending the session. And I think Jeremy's coming back up.